Before I start actually showing you some code and how to code, I want to talk about dimensioning variables. It's also called declaring variables. Um, in years ago, when computer memory was at a premium and there just wasn't that much space available in terms of computer memory, it was incredibly important to dimension your variables because what that does is tells the computer how much memory to allocate for the variable. And that might sound kind of silly right now, given how much memory computers have. And I'm not talking about storage space on the hard drives, but the memory. I can't remember what it's called, RAM, I think. Uh, you can dimension a variable as an integer, so that would be a number that falls within the range I'm highlighting right now, and the computer would set aside 2 bytes of storage for that. If you dimensioned a variable as a long variable, then it could fall in this range, and the computer would set aside twice as much storage for that, 4 entire bytes. And you can see there are different types. These are all numbers, but the computer just set aside different amounts of storage for them. And then you could also set a variable as a string, which would be text, but it couldn't be more than 65,400 characters. Um, you could declare a variable length string, and again, it couldn't be more than 2 billion characters. A Boolean variable is one that's either true or false. So, like if we were testing to see if a cell had an error in it and we used is error, it would either be true or false. And so we would dimension a variable if we were naming a variable to test for an error as a Boolean, and it would only set aside 2 bytes for that, etc. Um, some people argue nowadays that you don't really need to dimension variables because space isn't an issue anymore like that. Others argue that you should dimension variables because it will help you find typos if you make them. So if you try to use a variable name that you hadn't dimensioned, it would find that mismatch, I think is what they call it, and alert you, and then you would know, hey, I probably just misspelled my variable. I'm going to dimension ours because if you're reading about VBA online and such, you'll probably see that they dimensioned their variables. Um, that's one reason I'm doing it, and the other reason is to help me catch typos because I tend to make a lot of those. So let's pop over to Excel and let's create some code. This is one of your more recent assignments. I think it was the conditional formatting one. And there we just had some movies and different information about the movies. I'm going to use VBA to count the number of movies that meet a certain genre. Now, obviously, I could just use count if the cell equaled action, let's say, I would count it and it would count the number of action movies. I could do this without using VBA, but my purpose is just to show you some simple VBA in a project that you're already familiar with. So, we're going to add some code to this particular sheet. So I'm going to go to the Sheet tab and I'm just going to right click it and say View Code. And it opens up the Visual Basic Editor, or VBE, they call it. Um, and now I'm going to insert a module. And this is where my code will go. And you can see there's this section called General with declarations. If I wanted to dimension or declare variables as strings or integers or what have you that applied to the entire worksheet, I could dimension them here. If I only have variables that are needed in a small amount of code, then I can dimension them inside the subroutine itself, and I will do the latter. So let's start a subroutine, and I will call this sub count genre. And when I type enter after I finish the word genre, you'll notice it puts those 2 parentheses and then an end sub. and I type my code within those. Y'all probably knew that already because you've recorded some macros and you've edited them. And a subroutine is just a section of code that performs a specific task. You generally want to keep your code fairly small within subroutines, mainly I think because it's easier to edit them. And then if you had four or five or more different subroutines, you can create a main sub that calls the separate subroutines. So I'm going to dimension my variables. I'm going to create a variable called I that's just going to be used as basically kind of a counter. And I'm going to dimension it as an integer. And then I'm going to dimension my genre number as an integer. I seem to have trouble spelling integer. I spell it that way every time. Notice that I don't know if you can tell really well in the video, but it's turning some of the words blue. That's a good sign. It means it recognizes those as things it needs to do that's specific to the VBA code. I'm going to mention my desired genre as a string. I could do all of this on one line, so I could go dim I as integer, comma, genre number as integer, comma, desired genre as string. But I kind of like putting them on a single line, each one on a single line. Now, sometimes you might want to put comments in your code just for you, and the computer, you don't want the computer to actually recognize it as code or try to use it as code because it's not code. You preface that with a single apostrophe, and so here I'm going to put, make sure you have a named range in the worksheet called genre. So I'm going to go make sure I've done that. So over here, I want to have named this range genre, and I have. I'm just looking over here in the named range section. Now, I could have maybe I want to add additional movies over time for whatever reason. I could create this as a dynamic named range and have Excel count the number of items in the range, and the name range would change. So I'm just trying to show you, you don't have to do it as simply as I'm doing it right here. I'm just trying to introduce you to VBA right now. So now that I'm sure I've got my name range, I've dimensioned my variables, I am now going to create an input box that will ask the user what genre do you want me to count. So I'm going to set my desired genre as the value that I collect from my input box. So we've never done an input box. We did a message box a couple of times, I think. Input box is very similar. So it's just going to pop up with the text that I tell it, a space for me to type my answer, and then it's going to store that answer in a variable called desired genre, which is a string variable, which means it holds text. And it can't hold more than 64,000 something characters. I don't think that's a problem. So whenever you're trying to collect data from an input box and store it, you have to put a parentheses after your input box. And so now I'm going to type the text that I want it to display. So what movie genre do you want? To check. And I'm going to close that text string and close my parentheses. Now I'm going to tell it to start counting the movies that meet the genre requirement. And professional programmers, and I don't claim to be one, indent things a lot to group different parts of the code. So now I'm going to start the little part of the code that's going to count the genre numbers. So right now my genre number, which I've declared or dimensioned as an integer, which is just a number, is I want it to set it to 0. But now I want to start counting them. So if, or sorry, for I, which is just basically something that's going to loop through and count things, for I equal 1 to however many items are over here in my tab. I'm trying to think here. It's early in the morning. I basically have 26 rows of movies that I want it to loop through, check to see if the genre equals whatever I've requested, and count it if it does equal to it. But it has to loop through 26 of these. And I can tell if you look at the bottom right of where my cursor is, that says 26R times 1C, 26 rows times 1 column. I don't want to tell the computer to do this 26 times because it might not always be 26. So I'm going to tell it to count however many items are in that range. So I'm going to go for I equal 1 to range genre, that's my named range, dot count. So it will count how many items are in the genre range, and for 1 to 26, it's going to do what I tell it to next. And what I want it to do next is to take that genre number, which started with 0, and add to it by 1. Oops, I missed something. So from 1 to 26, if the range genre cell value, so what this says is look in the cell of the range genre. So that's basically going to be from H2 to H3 to H4. It's going to just loop through and do these. So this is saying cell 1, column 1, cell 2, column 2, sorry, column 1, cell 3, column 1. It's going to do that all the way until it gets through 26. If that value equals the desired genre, which I'm determining from the input box, then I'm having trouble typing, then I want it to take the genre number of 0, add 1 to it if the desired genre is actually found in these cells. And then I'm going to go end if. And I'm just looking to see if things are turning blue when they're supposed to. So 4 and 2 are standard parts of the code. Then, or sorry, if and then my end if. Those should all be blue. And hopefully you can tell that on your screen. Now, if I had wanted it to do something else, I could have put an else right here and told it what else to do, but I just don't have anything else to put in there. So it's basically an if then and a potential else statement, just like we've used as functions, but it's just presented differently in the VBA format. And then I want it to go to the next I. So it's going to start with I1, check to see if the desired genre is found in the cell location. If it is, it's going to add 1 to the number, genre number. Then it's going to go to the next I, and it's going to do this until it reaches 26, because that is the count of the cells in the genre range. Then I need it to produce some output. So I'm just going to create a message box. And because I'm not trying to collect data from this message box, I'm just outputting a result, I am going to not use a parentheses. So that's text I want my message box to contain, and I want it to report the number, genre number. So I can actually include variables in my display in my message box. So and then I'm going to use the ampersand, which is what they call the concatenation operator. It's just a way to join things. There are ampersand genre number. The I'm not always capitalizing things right. Like I capitalize this G in genre, and you notice Excel just fixed that for me. I didn't do that because I didn't capitalize the G in genre number when I declared my variable. And I know I used the word declared, and it doesn't have DEC in front, it has DIM, which stands for dimension. But dimension and declare are essentially the same things. So I wanted to say there are however many and movies in the, and notice I'm putting spaces where I want spaces to appear in my text as well. And then another ampersand, and then desired genre, another ampersand, and just the word genre and a period. And that will be my message box. Now I want to run this. So I could just run it from here, and I should. Let's run it and test it. I'm gonna. I'm just gonna click run subroutine. So it now, first of all, it's very rare for things to actually work perfectly the first time. I actually just typed this up yesterday and I have the code right in front of me, so I knew what I was supposed to do. But shockingly, I didn't make any typos. So it's popped up with what movie genre do you want to check. I don't know if y'all can actually see that because the font's really small. Now, in this case, I have to capitalize everything appropriately, I believe. So I'm going to just type action, and so it has counted, and there are 8 movies in the action genre. So I know it is working. So now I'm going to attach this to a form control. So I'm just going to minimize that and add a button. I'm just going to add a button on top of stuff. Uh, so developer, insert, and I'm going to show you something. Now I've added a form control. No, actually this should be fine. So it doesn't matter if you do a form control or an action X control. So I just did a form control, and I will call this count movies. And then push it, and then I'm not going to capitalize the A in action, and I don't think it's going to count them. Yeah. So in this case, I had to capitalize everything properly, but I could change my VBA code to add in some stuff that says, don't worry about the capitalization. I'm just not going to do that in this demo, but I just want to explain that you can take care of pretty much any issue that you can think of that might happen. You can fix it in the VBA code. Okay, now I want to show you how to um, use some input boxes to collect data and pop that data into your worksheet. So for this example, I'm going to basically use our project one. So remember we had an inputs tab, and we had to click on things where they went, and we typed stuff in. But we could use input boxes. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to use input boxes because there was a fair amount of data we were trying to collect, but I'm just trying to demonstrate this idea to you. So I want an input box that, or box, basically this is a message box, that pops up and says, do you want to use an input box to input your data, or would you rather type directly into the spreadsheet? And if they say type directly into the spreadsheet, you'll just pop them over here so they can do that. But if they say they want an input box, then the next step would be to pop up the input box and start to collect the data and then put the information in the spreadsheet here. So, um, I'm going to right click on the inputs and I'm going to go to view code. And this is going to be a sub that I'm going to call, oops, let's see. Well, I guess I'll call it this worksheet activate. Now, oh, it did it wrong. No, it did it right. It just didn't capitalize it. If you look, or maybe it did, maybe I will click on that one. Okay, I think it's going to be fine even though I didn't capitalize it. I'm sorry, I'm not a VBA expert. I know enough to scrape by. Notice that it went to the worksheet. I think before it said general and then declarations over here, but when I put the worksheet there, it popped this up and did select activate. But there are other things that can happen to the worksheet that will activate this subroutine. I want this subroutine to pop up whenever I click on the tab for this worksheet, which means it will activate that worksheet. So if I calculated a number in the worksheet, it could activate this subroutine. If I activate the worksheet, it can activate this subroutine. If I deactivate the worksheet, which means I click on another worksheet in the spreadsheet, I've deactivated this one, it can activate this subroutine. Just so happens I want this one to activate whenever I activate the worksheet. So now I'm going to dimension my variables. I'm going to have a prompt for my message box, and I'm going to dimension it as string. I'm going to have a title for my message box. I'm going to dimension it as a string, and then I'm also going to have an answer, which I'm going to dimension as an integer, which I almost misspelled. Then I'm going to collect data from the input box. I'm going to collect the client name, which would be string. I'm going to collect the client's birthday, which would be a date. And if you don't input a date in that input box when it asks for the birthday, it will give you an error. I'm going to mention the current savings as currency. And I'm just going to scoot over. You can see those are the three items that I am attempting to collect. When I'm coding, I don't usually code this neatly. I would say, okay, what do I need? I want a box prompt, a box title, a box answer. These are all for my message box. And then I'll go down and I'll write the code for the message box. And then I'll go, okay, all right, I want to put an input box here. So what do I want to collect? And then I will dimension these things. So I'm just doing it one line consecutively, the first line, the second line, the third line, but that's only because I've got the code right here in front of me. But when I actually code, it's not this smooth. So now I've got to basically define what my box prompt is. So what do I want my message box to say? I could do this all within the message box coding, but I'm doing it a little differently because I want to, oh, I'm looking. I just want to show you something. I thought there was a reason why I did it, but I'm not sure there really was. So box prompt is, do you want to collect data with a form? And message boxes can only have a select number of buttons. You cannot create custom buttons easily in a message box. There is a long workaround, but I don't want to show you that. You can have an OK button, a cancel button. I can't remember the rest of them. Oh, a yes button, a no button, and a couple of other things. You can have a little critical icon pop up. I think it's just like a red X or something like that. But since I can really just have a yes or a no button, I need to couch my message so that they can answer yes or no. So if you choose yes, unfortunately, well, I'm going to press enter, but I shouldn't. I'm only pressing enter because it's not going to show on the screen. So I'm going to, oh, it's not going to let me. All right. Another way I can do that is put that underscore. I don't actually want that underscore, so in a little while I'll go and delete it, but this is how I'm getting the entire text to show up on my limited screen that's recording right now. So if you choose yes, a series of dialog boxes will pop up for you to enter data. If you choose no, I'll just put choosing no. It's a little shorter. We'll let you input data directly on the spreadsheet. Uh, and then I'm just making sure my close quote pops up. Um, and I don't know if this is going to work or not. The underscore just means the line of code continues on the next line. And I see it didn't like it. It's turned my coding red. So I am going to delete the underscore so this long prompt just continues over to the right and you won't be able to see it. Again, I only put the underscore so I could wrap around. Uh, the reason it just gave me that error is it's still waiting for this closing quote, and I haven't yet deleted this underscore. At least I think that's what the problem is. Uh-oh. Hmm. Oh, okay, that's the problem. I think maybe it wasn't even the underscore, I don't think. It wants to, I just need a single quote here for my yes, because the double quote, it was closing this double quote, and then I did weird stuff after the double quote that didn't meet its requirements. So I'm just going to put the word yes in a single quote and the word no in a single quote. And to test it, oops, uh, there's this another extra quote there. Another one. It's popping that up automatically. Oh, that's why I have an enter there. Okay, yep, the message box just does not like the underscore that lets you wrap around text. I don't know why, but it just doesn't like it. And see, it put another. Ugh, this is kind of annoying. It put another double quote trying to close my message because it thought I had screwed up, and now it did it again. Oh, that's because I've got that enter. Got to get rid of the enter sign. Come way over here, get rid of this enter. Now I've got my double quotes surrounding the entire thing, and everything is, well, it's not popping up any errors, so it looks good. These are just kind of things you have to get used to when you're programming in VBA, and it will be frustrating at first, extremely frustrating probably. Now I want my box title, And that's just a little thing that goes at the top of the box, and this is, I'm going to call it collect data. I have to put it in quotes. And then I want my box answer, all these things that I mentioned earlier. This time I want to collect information from my message box. Are they going to answer yes? Are they going to answer no? So since I'm collecting an answer from my message box, I have to put parentheses after the word message box. If I weren't collecting information from my message box, those parentheses don't have to be there. Maybe you should just get in the habit of always putting them there, because I don't think it hurts if you include them and you're not collecting information. Like sometimes a message box might just be to provide information, but this time I want to see whether they're collecting, they're checking yes or no. So now my message box is going to have the prompt. So box prompt. Then it's going to have the box title. Oh, nope. First it's going to have the what buttons I want. So then that's going to be I want a yes button, a no button, and a cancel button. So I could say VB yes plus VB no plus VB cancel. But they have a code that lets you do all three at once. So VB yes, no, cancel. We'll do all of those buttons at the same time. And then I want my box title. And I could just run this, so I think I will. I just want to see if my message box is going to pop up right. It won't do anything when I press yes or no because I haven't programmed it to do anything yet, but I'm just checking my thing in stages. So here's my message box, and it's got the three buttons I want. I'm just going to hit cancel though because it won't do anything else. So I should be documenting my code. So and probably most people are not particularly rigorous when it comes to documenting their code. So here I want to check which button is pressed. And either use a series of input boxes to collect data, or send the user to the Inputs tab. So if the box answer, so did they click yes, did they click no, did they click cancel? And notice this is my code. It says if the, oops, it's really annoying that I cannot press and highlight different areas of code before I've finished an entire line. The box answer is whatever they click in this message box. So if the box answer equals VB no, then I want it to essentially activate the workbook, the worksheet that is the Inputs tab. So active workbook dot worksheets, and then I'm going to tell it the inputs one, and then I will tell it what cell to actually put the cursor on. So I want it to go to, let's say, cell A1. Gotta have that in quotes. And then I want it to select cell A1. So this is my object and the specific cell in that object, and then this is select is the method. I've told it what to do. They call that the method. It's basically an action. the method is. So now I'm through with my if statement for the box answer. So I'm just going to go end if. And when I press enter, it should turn blue. So now I want to tell it what to do if they press cancel, let's say. So if the box answer, oops, should be one word, equals VB cancel, then I want it to, again, just pop back to the worksheet. So I'm going to just copy this. I should probably say if box answer equal VB no or VB cancel, but I'm going to do them separately for no good reason. And I see I spelled cancel wrong, so I have to fix that. And then I've got to put an end if for this if statement and an end if for this if statement. Now, to me, it makes sense to do the simple ones up here. They're less likely to have mistakes in them. Do the more complicated one toward the bottom. So if I have to debug it, I know to look toward the bottom of my code, and that's where the problem is likely to lie, because that's where the complicated stuff is happening. So now if my box answer equals VB yes, then I want it to do some slightly more complicated stuff. I want it to collect the client name, which I've dimensioned as a string up here, through an input box. So my client name equals an input box. Again, I'm collecting data, so I'm putting my parentheses. My title will be what is your client's name? And then a comma and the name for my input box, which would be client name. That's just what's going to pop up as a header, basically. And then I'm going to tell it to put in this tab, well, I'm going to go ahead. I'm being inconsistent, but I'm purposely being inconsistent so I can show you different things. I'm going to tell it to go to range A1 and the value will equal the client name that the person just typed in. Now notice I didn't put the worksheet's input in front of this range A1, but I did up here. I didn't need to put all the active workbook worksheets input, all this stuff, because actually all this stuff, because this code will never be run until the inputs worksheet is activated. So I don't need to direct it specifically to the inputs worksheet because it's already there. I just need to direct it to the range within the inputs worksheet. But let's say I've got some code that involves the whole spreadsheet and I need to specifically refer to a tab, then I need to put the tab that I want it to go through to and the range that I want it to go to. Okay, so now the birthday is going to be inputted. So the birthday is another input box. And what is your client's birthday? Please enter as, oops, and we'll go, what is it, month, day, year. Close quotes, a comma, and then the header, which I'll just say is client birthday, and close quote. Uh-oh, I've done something wrong. Oh, I forgot my parentheses, which will be right there. And then I want it to go to range A2 and make the value of that range equal to the birthday. So it's just storing that information on the spreadsheet. And then lastly, I want to collect the current savings, another input box, So how much current savings do you have? And a comma, the header for my input box, close quote for the header, and then close parentheses for the input box. And I'm going to have it pop that information in range A3. So I'm telling it the value for range A3 is equal to the current savings that we just collected. And I'm using the variable name, so I have to, this is what I called the current savings variable, and it has that underscore, so I have to put the underscore. Variable names, if I didn't mention it and you didn't notice, cannot have spaces. Now I'm going to do my end if. Now there are some other things I could do that I'm not doing. I I want to check to see if they actually inputted a date. They might forget they might enter it incorrectly, not as MMDDYY. And I could add code here that checks for that, pops up a message if they did it wrong. I definitely need current savings to be a dollar amount. I could put code that checks for that and tell them that they did it wrong if they did. Um, Even though I dimensioned current savings as currency, that doesn't mean a person could type in something that's text. It won't like it though. Excel won't like it. And it won't like it if I don't type something in that looks like a date. So, but Excel doesn't know what to do if you input something that's not a date for the birthday. You have to tell it what to do, and you do that with all this code. I'm not going to put that code in there, but you can. And you should. I'm just not going to spend the time to do it. This is just an introduction. All right, so now I think that's actually it because I've already told it my cancels and my no's. So let's just test it. And here I'm just going to run it through the VB editor. So do I want to collect data with a form? Yes. My client's name, let's say that's Ben. And my client's birthday, which I will enter properly, let's say that's 12/10/99. And then how much current savings do they have? We'll say 50,000. And it just popped me back to my code because I had run it within the code, but I'm sliding this over so you can see that it actually did put that information in the spreadsheet. Now I want to attach this code to something. Oh, actually, no, sorry, it's already attached. It happens when we activate our tab. So I'm actually going to just go back to Excel by clicking the View Microsoft Excel icon in the upper left corner of the Visual Basic Editor. And now I'm going to click off of the Inputs tab and click back onto the Inputs tab, which means I'm activating it, and it should pop up that code. Maybe that's not the best way to get the code to start working. Maybe I would like to add a button here that says change client data instead. But I'm just showing you that you can, different events is what they call them. Different events can trigger your code. One thing that Visual Basic is used for a lot in Excel is to create a user form. This would be perhaps a viable way to collect data about your clients for our project 1. Obviously, I didn't have us use this because it's a lot more complicated than the way we did it. And we were starting off simple. User forms are what most people view as dialog boxes. So I'm going to right click the Inputs tab and go to View Code. And I'm going to turn this worksheet off. I'm going to put it to, I don't know, before delete. So before I delete this table, this would happen. It doesn't make sense to put it in before delete, but I just want to take it off the, oh shoot, it didn't do that. It didn't do what I expected it to do. Oh, I have to make this, call this before delete. I just don't want this code to pop up every time I activate the Inputs tab. Anyway, I guess I'll just leave it. So let's now insert a user form. So that within the Visual Basic Editor, insert user form. And now we're going to design our dialog box. We've got this little toolbox that looks fairly similar to the insert menu on the developer tab. So you'll have some experience with doing stuff like this. So this is basically a dialog box that will pop up when we tell it to collect information from a user. So again, let's say we're working with project one. So we'd like to collect our client's name, whether they're male or female, how much current savings they have, their life choices, their desired legacy, etc. I'm only going to do a couple of those, the client's name and whether they're male or female, and then code them and just show you how to code them. So I want a text box that's going to have the client's name. You know, I'm going to make this really big so y'all can see it on the video. Obviously, I wouldn't do it this big on my if I were actually doing this to get it to work. It's going to be huge. So a box to put my client's name, and then I want a label. There's actually one called label, and I'm just looking for it. There it is. So I want a label that says client's name. Now my font is very small. I'll show you how to change that. So client's name. When we use the insert ActiveX controls on the developer's toolbar, there was a properties window that popped up. Yours might have already popped up. Mine was just turned off right now, so I'm going to turn it on. So I want to see the properties of this label and the properties of this text box. So I'm going to go to View, Properties window, and now I can show the properties. And I am sorry, but I cannot make this larger. The name is not what's actually going to show in the box. It is what this object, this label object, is called. So when I'm programming things, it would be the name that I would use in my coding. Now, I'm not going to actually program the label box to do anything, but and actually, I'm just going to leave this at label 1, I think. My computer is being really slow all of a sudden. All right, but I do want the font to be larger. So down here in the font properties, it says Tahoma and it has a little continuation icon. I'm going to press it, and here I can change the size. So since I'm doing such a large user form, I'm going to make the font 22 or something like that. And then let's say I want to align the text on the right because it would be closer to the actual box, although I could just resize it. I'm just showing you another thing you can do. So down here under text align, instead of having it align left, I can have it align right. I could also, I believe, center it from top to bottom, but for now I'm just going to leave it. Now I want to add, what do you call it, a group. And I'm going to put some option buttons in there. So again, I'm making it really big so y'all can see it. Instead of, I'm going to leave it the name at frame 1 because I'm not going to do any coding with frame 1, but the caption, which is what actually appears up here, I don't want it to say frame 1, I want it to say gender. And then I'm going to add, and I don't know if I can make that any larger. I bet I can. So I'm going to, I see it says Tahoma, and I'm going to make it font 16. And now you can read it. Now I'm going to add 2 option buttons. And one will say male. And so the name, this one I do want to put some code in. So if they press this button, I want something to happen. So I'll call this one my mail button, and then the caption will be mail as well. Your name doesn't have to equal your caption, but in this case I think it just makes sense to. And then I'm going to add my second option button, and that will be female. And ideally, I'd like for them to all be the same size, but I don't know if I manage that. So my name will be female, and my caption will be female. And I can group all those if I want. I could also change the color of the background, and I'm going to just do that. So I've just clicked on my actual user form, and I can see that I'm on my user form right now. And I should probably rename that to something other than user form 1. Let's call it client data. Oops, since this is a name that's to be used for coding, my computer's just being super slow, and I pressed backspace too many times. So client underscore, because it's a name for coding, it can't contain any spaces. But my caption, which I think it's going to put up there, can. So client data. I can also make that name larger. I don't know if it actually worked. I don't think it did. And then, but if I want to change the color, so the back color, so all this gray, we've done this before. I've forgotten what we were doing it with. I think our ActiveX controls. They're what they call system colors. Those are the pretty plain gray, black, white, grayscale, or whatever. But if I click on palette, I can choose from a set of other colors. It's not very extensive. And I'll just choose this one. And then I would obviously want to change the back color of my group box to that, and the back color of my option boxes. Oops. I probably shouldn't take the time to do all this, and I guess I'll stop. But you see what I'm getting at. So now I want to add two buttons. One's going to say OK, and one is going to say cancel. And the name of the first one will be my OK button. The caption will be OK. And then my second button, and I should take the time to make sure they're the right size, etc. I don't think they are. My name will be the cancel button, and my caption will be cancel. Okay, so I have a very limited user form. Obviously, if I wanted to input all the stuff we collected on the client from the first project, it would take more time. And I'm just trying to be efficient. So now it's time to do our coding. So what I want to code is basically the OK button and the cancel button. I'm just going to click on one of these, and notice what it did is it basically inputted my header for my sub for the OK button. I'm going to, for some reason I can't remember how to get back to it. Oh, I'm going to go back to my user form, which is the client data, and I'm going to click on the cancel button, and now it's popped up the beginning and end lines for my subroutine for if I click on the cancel button. But there are other things I can do. If I mouse down on my cancel button, that can activate some code. If I double click on my cancel button versus a single click on my cancel button, that can activate different types of code. But these are the only events that you can assign code to for a button. And then I'm going to go back to my client data form. Come on. And let's see, is there anything else? Oh, if this changes, I'd like for it to input the data into the worksheet. So I clicked on that, and there's not much that can happen to a text box. So it assumed that change was what I wanted to do. And then clicking back here, if they choose male, I want it to assign gender as male. If they, so I'm just clicking on these to build up the little things that I want to code. And then if they click on female, I want it to assign gender as female. All right, and then I want to dimension some things. So I'm going to come up here and just do some dimensioning. And since I'm before the first sub, it has put me into the general declarations area, and that's great. I want the things that I'm dimensioning here to apply to a couple of these subroutines. So I want them in the general declarations so it'll use them across multiple subs. So I'm going to dimension gender as a string because it can be either male or female. I'm going to dimension life expectancy, which is something I'm going to calculate as an integer. And then I'm going to dimension client name. I think I actually already have something called client name in another subroutine on this worksheet. So I'm going to use client name 1, and that's going to be a string. And I might have gender, but I'm not sure. Well, if I have gender elsewhere, it'll tell me. It'll give me an error when I try to use it. So now I've got my 3 variables dimensioned or declared. So I'm just going to go through these different subroutines and tell it what to do. If they click the cancel button, I just want it to stop. The way to tell it to do that is use the command unload me. And then maybe I want it to go to a certain spot on a certain worksheet. So I'm going to say active workbook dot worksheets and then inputs. And then I want it to go, let's say, to range A1, and I want to select that range. And that's it for my cancel button. And for my female button, if they click that, I would like for it to assign a value to the gender variable. So if they click this, gender equal female. And now let's say life expectancy equals 78. So remember, males and females had different life expectancies. We also let them choose whether they were smoking, exercising, and I've forgotten what the third one was, but we could build all that into this code. And then if they click on the male option button, I'm going to say gender equal male and life expectancy equals 73. Let's do the text box change next, because it's not well, none of these are particularly difficult. But anyway, if they change the value in the text box, we want it to assign client name, which we've dimensioned as string, the value that they put in the text box. So that would be client name equals, oh, actually client name 1 equals, what did I call that? I've called it text box 1. That is not a very good name. I should rename it, but for now I'm just going to keep it that. So it's going to be the name of this user form, which is client data. How do I know that? I see it right here under the forms, and it's it's gray, which means I've chosen it. It's the form I'm actually on right now. So client data dot the name of the text box, which is text box 1, and then text. So the text that they put in text box 1 in client data form should be assigned to the variable client name 1. And then what I want it to do with that information is pop it into the range A1 because that's where the client's name is. So now I'm going to say go to range A1. I don't have to put worksheets inputs because I'm going to run this user form or assign this user form to the inputs tab. So it'll only ever run on the inputs tab. And then value equals client name 1. And that's the end of this particular subroutine. Now for my OK button, I want it to pop up a message box. And I'm not collecting data, so I don't need parentheses. So I'll just say hello, space, quote, ampersand to concatenate data, client name 1. This is just to show you that you can that it's stored the data in the value variables, stuff you can do with the data. Client name 1, another concatenator, a quote, space, you are, another space, quote, another concatenator, oops, you are a, and then let's put the gender, which is, I think I just called it gender, and so you are a male or a female, and you are expected to live until you are ampersand and then life expectancy. And we'll do an ampersand years old. Again, this is kind of a silly message to write, but I'm just showing you different things that you can do. And it hasn't caught any errors. So let's just see how it's going to work. I'm making sure I'm on the inputs tab because I'm just going to run it from here. So I'm going to run a sub or a user form. There's my user form. So Pamela, and let's say I'm female, and OK. So it says, hello Pamela, you are female and you're expected to live until you are 78 years old. So I know my user form is working. It stored the name Pamela here like it was supposed to. I didn't ask this particular form to do anything with birthday or current savings. But I could have, and I could take the current savings number that it collects and do some math with it with a formula and output the result to a cell on my tab and then do more math with it, just not in VBA but within regular Excel. So now I'm going to hit cancel and it should go back to my user form because I'm finished. Okay, so now the question is, how do you actually get the user form to appear? I could make it appear whenever this tab is activated, but in this case I'm going to assign it to a button. And I'm going to use an ActiveX control. So I will name this button or caption this button change data. And then I want to add some code to it. So I can just right click it and go view code. And I should rename the button, but I'm just running out of time. Uh, and so it's going to be the form name, which is client data, because I can see that right here. It's going to be the form name, so client data, and then dot show. So when I click that button, it'll activate my user form. So let's give it a go. I'm in the design mode, so now let's give it a go. So there is my user form, and I'm just going to hit cancel because I don't want to input anything right now. But that's how you would activate it. That's one way you could activate it.